Hi, everybody. This is Raquel Bannaby Hart, your host for The Power of Her Story. And we're back again with another exciting woman that we are celebrating today. As you know, The Power of Her Story curates the journey and celebrates the journey of women around the world and their impact on the community. We will also share about how women have overcome their various challenges to be where they're at today. And so we are so excited and delighted to have a Bahamian woman living in New York, making big strides in New York, but yet still making a significant impact in the Bahamas. We have with us, joining us today, Miss Rhonda Eldridge, all the way in New York. She's taken some time to be with us. Rhonda have a very extensive history in the financial industry, and even more recent, I call it, she's the cryptocurrency blockchain chick. And so she has me in every technology group talking about blockchains and cryptocurrency. And so we're going to learn a lot about that today and how she's using that to impact the community here in the Bahamas. Welcome, Rhonda. It's a pleasure to have you here with me today. How are you?
I am awesome. Always awesome. Thank you.
How is New York?
We are out and about. Where I am now, many of the social distancing rules or requirements have been lifted. So pretty much you'll never go back to normal, but everyone's wearing a mask. Everybody is respectful of remaining healthy.
Wow. Well, I understand that fully well. We just came off, particularly here in Grand Bahama, I call it somewhat of our restrictions isn't as I call it, as strict now, because we're more on curfew than lockdown. We came off about 3.5 weeks, I think it was, of 3.5 weeks to 4 weeks of lockdown. And so we're just glad that we're up and about. It didn't stop me. I kept going in the midst of all of this. And you know, I mentioned earlier, Rhonda, you are Bahamian, born, bred, love it.
Very proud.
And I mean, extremely proud of that. But what caused you to move to New York? Tell us about this transition.
So I would say it started in 1999. I was working, it was in the Bahamas. I'd just become the managing director of an operation in the Bahamas for a Dutch bank. We had an event in New York, and the global heads were absolutely sort of besides themselves that the person who had the majority of the clients was me. What brought all these clients to New York? Why did these clients come to New York to see you? And I said, it's just a relationship I have with them. And at the time, you talked about overcoming challenges. There was a comment made, and listen, I didn't take it to mean anything more than it was a comment. That I would do really well in New York because I got along so well with the clients. However, they were concerned. And they were concerned because I was a female.
Oh, wow.
And in this order, a female, a person of color, and from the Caribbean. And they weren't too sure how I would fare on Wall Street with the A-type personalities on Wall Street.
Wow.
So I just left that there. And it came up again because they were always putting people in the New York office. And then eventually they realized they were not staying in the New York office. People would get recruited. So someone said, you should really go back and talk with Rhonda. I think, they felt that I would do a fantastic job. So I got the call December 31st, 2002. I was in Palmdale when the global head called and said, we would like for you to come up to New York and bring your effervescent personality to run the operations, just liaise with all the clients, to take on a role that was new in our business at the time. And that was something of relationship, heading up all of be the ultimate person responsible for the relationships in the region. So that was sort of like, whoa. And I hesitated. Because I was a mother. I had at the time an 11-month-old baby, and I would have to leave everything, my family, move with my extended family, and my pot cakes. I was worried about my pot cakes, so I had my dog. I had my husband had his own business, so there were many, many things to consider. And my mom at the time was still alive, so I had many things. So that's the long and short of it.
Oh, wow. So that was a lot of obstacles to
Yeah,
overcome as a
yeah,
woman. Firstly, um, in the banking sector to overcome the stereotypes, particularly a woman and a woman
yeah.
of color leading in New York. And
Correct.
then, of course, like you said, being a mother, being
Yes.
a wife, and having a husband who owns a business. How do you bring balance to all of that? But
Correct.
you are still doing what you're doing. You're still in New York.
Yes.
Some almost 18 years later, you're
Yes.
still there and you're still
Mhm.
making a great impression. So you're a role model for many women who are in leadership in business to be
Yes.
able to
Thank you.
see that it is possible. And
Mhm.
that's what the power of her story is all about, is when we as women can share our stories that help others to overcome sometimes the insecurities, the doubts,
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
fears that they
Mhm.
may have in, going into places that they've never been before. And so I am extremely proud of you, Rhonda, and what
Thank
you
you.
are doing. And what you are doing even a little bit more than that,
Mhm.
I see you as an ambassador for the Bahamas in New York,
Yeah.
because anything that's happening in New York and you feel that the Bahamas can benefit from it,
Yeah.
you are there and present.
Right.
And more so, you and I met through technology, through
Correct. We did. Yes,
technology. And
we
see,
did.
I'm still here trying to figure all of this out. See, they're laughing at me, um, trying to keep this thing in my ear. But
Right.
don't worry, I think I've got the technology. And so you've been doing some big things here in the
Mhm.
Bahamas, even though you're in New York. You have been educating, you have been empowering, particularly our young people. Tell us a little bit more about your various community initiatives here in the Bahamas.
Okay, so I would say that it started back in 2014, 15 maybe. I worked with the Catholic Board of Education, and Charlene Smith approached me about doing an event in the Bahamas, and I was very passionate about it because it did have, I feel the Catholic Church had a major influence on my life growing up in the Bahamas. So it started off by bringing a very professional group of young performers who performed at schools across the tri-state area. And it
Mhm.
was called The New Kid. It was about bullying and the impact on bullying on not only kids, but when kids, when we become adults, this whole concept of we've got to, be aware of how we are and how we do bully and in the schools. So we brought that to the Bahamas, and that was, I think they did about four different performances. They were on TV, and they actually touched the lives of 3,000 students. That was the first event that I did. And a couple years later, just conversations. Speaking with Felix Stubbs, for example, I would meet with him. There were about maybe 10 people I always met with when I came home.
Mhm.
And it was outside of Starbucks, Westlake Street. We talked about his role in Rotary at the time and what are some of the concerns. And one of the things that resonated with me was that of the children. And I felt that was something I could have an impact on because I'd started a youth group in the Bahamas at the church that I was attending, Sacred Heart Church on Shirley Street. I started a youth group, and I was really inspired by the young people I met and my impact on them. So that was what led me towards just maybe education and kids. And that followed 2018, where we met at the crypto blockchain event in Freeport. So that's a little bit of the history behind how I sort of really was drawn to blockchain for many reasons. I was working in the space at the time in the reg tech blockchain space.
Mhm.
And I actually almost ran over somebody trying to get to Quasi and Dr. Moxley to say, hey, I'm a Bahamian in New York. They were at a conference and they were speaking, and I went up and volunteered to support them. I said, I'm in New York. I was responsible for the region. I've got a very extensive network. How can I help? So, again, the long and short of it.
Well, you have indeed been helping ever since. And so when we look at, I call it the very slim history that we're getting from you, because I know that you come with a lot of depth. And so I know the time together will not give you justice as to what all you bring to the table. Well, we'll try and pull out all of the nuggets out of you in the meantime.
Thank you.
But you speak about educating young people. You're passionate about young
Yes.
people.
Yes.
And of course, like I mentioned earlier, you're passionate about technology, implementing technology to make life efficient and effective. in
Correct.
many instances, and keeping us in the Bahamas on the cutting edge.
Correct.
And you've been mentoring a lot of the Bahamians who
Correct.
are in that space. Tell us
Hmm.
about that. And I know you have a summer program
Hmm.
also that you, I think last year was the first year you
Yeah.
started that program. Okay, tell us
Hmm.
a little bit more about your mentorship with a number of Bahamians who are abroad in the diaspora, and you're supporting them and also keeping them connected home, as
Hmm.
well as your I mean your hands in a little bit of everything right now,
Yes.
and also your summer program where you have been mentoring high school students and preparing them as well.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah, to get back to the whole concept of the mentorship, it just started by seeing a need. There are many persons. I didn't have the mentorship growing up, and I really didn't know what to do when I finished high school at 16.
Hmm.
You get to GCEs. My mom was like, "You got to go find a job," right? I couldn't afford to even go to COB. However, I was fortunate to have received one of the first recipients of the Tomlinson Scholarship, and that allowed me to go to. I had two choices: either go to England or to Canada. But I think that door that was opened for me, and Johnny Tomlinson, just sort of in the conversations with him about what I could do, I know that would be something many kids would benefit from. So I started mentoring a lot of entrepreneurs, young persons who had ideas, and one thing I felt was important for them was that I was of integrity with them. I kept our conversations confidential. I still do that today. But I also am very real with them. So if they're doing something and I feel that something that is not going to help what they're aspiring to be, they will tell you I am very point blank about that. I am very clear on that. I don't beat around the bush because I want to have a friendship. I said, I'm just letting you know if that's something you're going to do, that may not lead you in the right direction. And here are the reasons why. And sometimes they come back and they said, well, they heard me. They still went ahead and made the mistake. And they said, well, how did you know? I said, when you make the mistakes many times, you could share with people without stopping them. So that in and of itself, I think that integrity, that passion about giving back, and then the need to collaborate. I found in talking with many people in the Bahamas, there was always this sort of hoarding of information, and you hoard the information because you're like, it's all for me. I'm going to get information for me, and I'm not going to share it with you. And there's almost a competitive angle to that, because in competing, we were not moving forward. Everybody's in their little like corner,
Right.
sharing. They're afraid to collaborate because
Hmm.
what they have said, and I could be wrong. When I share my idea with someone, if they have the money, the next thing I know, I see my idea played out in a movie because I'm watching my idea take off without me, and then they don't want to do anything for the fear of being sort of marginalized or criticized or something like that. We cannot continue to be a community that's building and inspiring our kids in that way. So that was why I felt it was important to share my time, my knowledge, my skills, and my resources to create a space for the children to really understand what technology is, understand 21st century learning, not just the foundational learning, but also the character that we must have and the competencies we must have today. So in being, last year I collaborated with as many of the tech shops or tech camps in the Bahamas. I just reached out to all of them and I said, look, let's do this together. And we not only collaborated on the event, which I feel the kids absolutely had a great time, and they gave great feedback that allowed us insight into what they wanted us to do this year. But what I found also was that coming together, I was able to share, even in that small community. We started another group, and that group is really to talk about data. And I was saying, I said to them, okay, you guys have great events. What does the data tell you? And they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, the data tells you something about impact. The data tells you something about the present value of what you're doing to impact the country. And these are silent warriors. And I don't want to call them out because I know some of them don't want to be called out, but they had so much valuable data, and they didn't know that that data was power, that data was an engine of impact. And when we literally took the data and we ran it through a predictive model, They were like, whoa, we didn't know we were doing that. I'm like, yep, you're doing that. And that is when we start to see trends in what we do and the impact it could have on the future generation, if not the current generation as well. So that's the history a little bit behind the whole concept of the summer camp. This year we expanded it like we wanted to from last year. The kids say we wanted more diversity. We wanted to move outside the Bahamas. So we thought we'll invite 4 countries. And of course, we didn't get to do that with COVID-19. So we did it virtually. We
Okay.
created a space virtually for them.
Well, Rhonda, okay, so you're using technology to impact the community, to give back. You're using Wall Street in your network to bring influence and resources into the Bahamas. And so, what I'm looking at is, I call it that perfect model for
Mm-hmm.
Bahamians who are no longer living in the Bahamas. There's still ways in which you can give back
Yeah.
and make significant impact in the Bahamas. But I go, that's all the pretty stuff. I mean, you give us a little bit of some of the challenges you had to overcome. What, how I want to pose this question to you. The Rhonda of the 1960s to the Rhonda of 2020. What was
Mm-hmm.
that journey like? Tell us about the Rhonda.
Um,
Who is really Rhonda?
so I grew up over the hill in the Grove. No water, no light, no indoor plumbing of any kind. And I recall my early years being in maybe a 3 or 4 room house, and then we moved. I know it was a 2 room house with an extended kitchen, living room, and then the bedroom. And I attended private school. Never invited anyone to my home because, well, first of all, I didn't have a phone, so there was no way to communicate. But remember going outside to use the outhouse, using a slub bucket to take a bath in the morning, put on my uniform, went to school, pretty much became a geek. I was a geek. I wore glasses, wore braces, loved Latin. So I really loved Latin. I loved literature. Sharon Smith was my form teacher, and she said she used to watch me. I would come in every day, and she would watch me, and I was like, I would say I was a geek because I was what they would call I came first, if you want to look at levels.
Mhm,
But I never really looked at it as anything because I still had to go home and I had no water, no light,
mhm,
etc. But I did study, and I remember studying with a kerosene lamp.
mhm,
Really, particularly like subjects like Latin, I remember studying and not having any power or electricity in the home. And I did that up until I perhaps maybe a year before I graduated, maybe 2 years before I graduated from high school. And pretty
mhm.
much my mom said, "Okay, you got to go work. You got to go find a job," because she paid for the private school, and I didn't have a group of persons in school in while I was at St. John's College. For all of those persons at St. John from St. John's. Um, but that's how I lived. And pretty much my mother couldn't afford to keep all her children in one place. So my grandparents had, my sister and brother grew up with my grandparents, and I had an extended family through my father. And one of the things that I found was a challenge to me growing up is I was the product of an affair. And I was embarrassed by that, but I realized so many of our kids in the Bahamas probably are, and
Mhm,
they are under they're out of the spotlight, meaning that they are meant to feel that they're a mistake, but they're not. And
mhm,
I own that. I own my mother insisted on having my father's last name, which I carried up until I got married.
mhm,
So that was my journey, like, not feeling I wanted to stay out of the spotlight because I felt, I was sort of this
mhm.
child with this scarlet letter A. But I
Right.
realized, in terms of my education, my wanting to learn and I love learning. That was my way out, my education. So I
Well,
was proud of that.
well, Rhonda, you just shared a story I think that many Bahamians
Hmm.
can relate to.
Correct.
And the good thing in what you were sharing, and that's what the power of her story is, that you allowed it to shape you and propel you to
Hmm.
where you are at today. Because
Right.
sometimes when we have these kinds of challenges, sometimes people feel that there's no way out. I grew up
Right.
in the ghetto, I grew up over the hill,
Mhm.
as many of us did. And how I didn't have, I guess, well, fortunately for you, you had a private school education, but you didn't have an opportunity to go off to college.
Yeah.
But here it is at the end of the day, years later, the same Rhonda becomes a managing director
Yeah.
of an international bank, an
Mhm.
offshore bank, and
Mhm.
is now asked to be in New York to lead and be on Wall Street. And today she's making and giving back to her
Mhm.
community because she understands what it was to go to an outhouse. And we
Yeah.
have people globally watching. So when we say a slop bucket, that's our
You know what I
behavior.
mean, right? Girl, like boil the water in the morning, stand in that bucket, wipe down, put on your uniform, and walk into school like nobody's business. I listen. I wouldn't say I was. I know some days it was tough because you're going to this private school, and when you go there, you're around kids who have a very different journey. I just didn't know their journey, but education was the thing for me, and I I just knew that it was something that I needed to continue to really strive for. And I also want to mention I started going to COB. I was working. I paid for my classes at night. It was Eve Poitier, who was one of my teachers, professors at COB, who literally said to me, she called me McDiggin. McDiggin, you're getting like A's, and there was another professor. You're getting A's, and the next grade is probably a C plus. You really need to get off this island. And I tell that story often because her words resonated with me. And I started looking around COB, and I came across a flyer. That's how I found out about the scholarship. Kids
Mhm.
who are academically strong. I said, okay, I tick that box. And we would send you to the best universities in Canada or England. So McGill, U of T, Western University, Queen's University in Canada, LSE, Cambridge, or Oxford in England. You had a choice. You can go to any one of those.
Mhm.
They said you had the grades. What are the chances I would apply and get the scholarship? I remember the day they called me and said I got it. My girlfriend, who ended up coming to my graduation when I finished university, she picked me up and she swung me around. I remember she did that. And I just couldn't believe that I had a full academic scholarship, everything paid except my clothes. They didn't pay for the clothes, the airline, the books, the school, accommodation, 2 flights back and forth during the year.
Mhm.
Um, and that was a game changer for me. Someone gave me that gift, and I think that's what I always remember. And all they required is that you came back home to the Bahamas. And while I only came back for 11 years and went back abroad, I never forgot that they told me, or they inspired me to pay it forward. And I think that's really why I do what I do, because someone gave me the opportunity. This young girl over the hill, no water, no light, kerosene light. And you had it here, but you didn't know that it could have impact. And when even though I've worked on Wall Street, I worked mostly, I worked predominantly in the alternative investment world, which is really finance, worked with hedge funds, doing banking custody, fund administration, and fund credit. So I did a bit of investment banking. Um, I always hear that I say to them, I come from very humble beginnings. And you know what they say to me? We know. We feel like we know, because you don't come into a room like you're ready to, kill somebody. You come into the room and you're like, so, oh, who is she? Right? You're quiet, you're confident, but it humbled me. The humble beginnings, I would say, have left me humbled, even working with some of the biggest names on Wall Street. And that's the thing, that you do not let it change you into somebody that you're not. And I am glad that I have had my mother to just keep me grounded in that way.
I went to say it had to be something and or someone that inspired you during
Yeah.
that part of your journey, because most times that even though in going into a private school and coming from the that kind of residential area, notice what
Mm-hmm.
I call it, a residential area.
Yeah. Over the hill, but only a street.
Yes, it's just another area.
Correct. Yes.
It had to be, because sometimes it plays on the emotional,
Mm-hmm.
psychological
Yeah.
output from a person
Yes.
because sometimes they feel I'm not good enough.
Correct.
And so even though they're getting the grades, they're naturally smart. And when you saw the flyer and that opportunity, sometimes people will talk themselves out of it. They'll
Correct.
look at that flyer and think,
Hmm.
that isn't for me.
Hmm.
Somebody else, somebody smarter, someone with a different hairstyle, a different background. We find all of the excuses
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
And I guess for me, I may say it's an excuse, but for them, that's real. They
Correct.
see that as a stumbling block because they never had that opportunity and no one inspiring them and encouraging them that they can do it. They can believe in
Correct.
themselves and they can excel. And so,
Mhm.
without you saying it, I figured your mother had a
She had a lot
significant
to do with
role.
it. She had a lot to do with it, and I will share quickly one quick experience with her. I was managing director at the time in the Bahamas, and we went to an event
Mhm,
at someone's house. One of the I think it was the chairman's house out east on the Eastern Road. And as we left, it was beautiful. It was a mother-daughter champagne evening, so they served us. And as we left, she started to. There were some tears, and I said, "Well, I thought you had a great time." She said, "I did have a great time." She said, for most of my career, my mother was a maid. I served at those homes. I wore white gloves, and I served these people at the homes. These big homes out east. And tonight, I went as a guest and I was treated with honor. They served her. And she saw that journey through me. And when we had the office opening, my mom was there. I always invited her and my sister. My brother didn't come all the time, but I invited them to come and be part of it
mhm,
because that's who I am. But she saw in me, and I said I would only because I was probably the oldest that she made sure that she gave me that opportunity. And she did that, I think, with all her kids. And I never forgot that. I made sure she was on that journey with me. When I graduated, she came up um, uh,
mhm.
to my graduation. When I became a chartered accountant, unfortunately, I did that on my own because I had no money at the time. So I had just passed my exams and I went up to Canada to get my certificate. But she was always that person, that rock that
Mhm.
was there with me. And I don't know if we're out of time, but and I just wanted to say that to say there's always going to be somebody who's going to be your rock. And all they're going to do is plant the seed of hope and
Mhm.
possibilities in you. And
Mhm.
they're always going to be in your head. Let that person be in your head as opposed to someone who tells you you're no good. You can't, girl, what you think you're doing? You can't be that. You have to
Absolutely.
just forget them and go with that one that tells you you can because you will.
Well, that is such it's a touching story for me because I understand that impact. Um, because for me, that was my mother as well. And so I understand that importance to have that rock, that person who sometimes believe in you more than you believe in your own self.
And we have
Because
a
some,
lot of those women, and and
Mhm,
and, and I want to share this because I think it's important for our men. Embrace the women, the single women raising both boys and girls in
mhm,
our community. We have a matriarchal society. Give the women that in terms of respect. Give it to them in terms of being head of household. Give it
mhm,
to them in terms of recognition and
mhm,
also in the legal system. Make sure the women have every right that a man has. And it's not because of equality, it's the
mhm.
right thing to do. Look at our society. The women are doing it, they're rocking it.
Like I say, it isn't about equality, it's about equity.
Oh, girl, that's the word. You notice how I said, don't give me equality, give me equity in what we're building in the country. And that's equity across all colors. Doesn't matter your color, your background, give it to us on everything. Someone has a great idea, don't take it and run with it. Say, hey, how could we build equity together and build the value of this and get it out there to the world?
Well,
I
Rhonda,
think our
you
time is
have.
up.
Yes, actually, don't
Hi,
worry, the
girl.
guys. Come
Thank
on,
you.
high
High
five
five.
over
Oh,
the
God.
guys, so don't worry, they're signaling me in the background. But I must say, this has been a pleasure, and I trust those who
Thank
are
you.
watching and listening. They would have received these nuggets that you would have shared. You talk about collaboration, you talk about education, you talk about giving back, you talk about community, you talk about humility, and finding that rock, that person who is there, who tell you you can, because you can.
Correct.
There's I have a dear friend who always say, "There's no such thing as can't." I don't like that word. And
Or shoulda,
so,
coulda, woulda. Shoulda, coulda, woulda. They're not your friends. Forget the shoulda, coulda, woulda.
but don't worry, Rhonda. By the end of this, I know my guys will probably tell me, Raquel, if you touch this airbud one more time. But Rhonda's gonna come up with some form of technology that's going to make the rest of my recordings seamless, and I won't have to be doing this all of the time. But Rhonda, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to share with you this afternoon, and indeed, I am proud as your sister,
Thank you.
Rhonda. Today for us here, and I'm saying today, but by the time this is aired, it'll be a week or so later. But
Yes,
today is actually, and I'll say it is September 1st, and
yes.
here in Grand Bahama, many persons in Grand Bahama and Abaco are reflecting.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, Dorian was coming
Yes,
through the islands, and as you know, it
mhm.
was the most devastating
Yes,
storm that
yes.
we have had. And Rhonda, I salute you and I thank you.
And we know
Almost
why, right?
yes, and almost immediately after, Rhonda was right there for me. She made ways out of no way to
I
get
told
to
you.
me.
Had to. And listen, there's so many more stories that we could tell, but maybe another time.
Yes.
But that's the thing. You see people suffering. They may not say they are, but you still go and say, "Hey, how can I help? Are you okay?"
Mhm.
And I think that one little act of kindness
Mhm.
goes so far in our lives because it makes us feel I may not do anything from here, but the
Mhm.
fact that I reached out and I
Mhm.
had, well, this the rest of the story. That was for us.
Yes.
That's for us.
Yes, and I'm so appreciative. And you continue to do what you do in the
Oh,
Bahamas. Some things are privately done.
correct.
I know about the scholarships. I know with the students,
Oh,
and so I will. Hold on. I'm telling all of her business.
oh, sorry,
But
but
she is just that kind of person. When she talks about giving back, she means that in a real way. And
mhm,
so I'm just grateful to the relationship she and I have forged over the years. I can always count on her and I can always call
yes,
on her as a rock for me. And
yes,
so I'm just thankful to you, Rhonda. And so to all of you, you've gotten to know a lot about Rhonda, and I know those tips and nuggets that she has shared with us can go a long way as
yes,
we celebrate, curate the journey of women. Sometimes we do not appreciate each other. But I had one of my guests yesterday who shared and said it's about educating each other as
mhm,
women, how
yes,
to truly empower each other.
mhm,
And so, with that said, I thank you all for tuning in today. Please feel free to watch me every Monday on YouTube, RBNTV Studio. Tune into our channel, like and subscribe so you'll know when new shows are coming out. We have a wonderful lineup of powerful, awesome women, all sectors and spheres of society. There's no big me and little me and all of this. It's just women
exactly.
who are sharing their stories, no matter where you are in life. Your story is important because someone's watching you and
Yeah,
you're helping someone to overcome their challenges in life. So feel free to share your story. Write to us. Let us know. Tell us about your journey, what life has been for you. So thank you for tuning in to the Power of Her Story and see you again real soon. God bless and have a wonderful week.
thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
You're watching RBNTV. We are networking, promoting, we're scoring points for you, proclaiming, declaring, here to encourage you, no matter the problem.